He said, if you'd like, I'll take you to a place where you'll get to see evidence of real UFOs. It's a place in New Mexico. It's not Roswell, but it is a place where a flying saucer crashed in the 1940s. And he said, I have to get permission to take you. It's under a no-fly zone, and you have to wear a blindfold to go in. And I remember taking off the blindfold and looking around. I said, this is ground zero of UFO belief right here.
Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. You are in the right place. This is how God works. And I am Dave DeSteno, psychology professor, religion writer, and yes, sci-fi fan.
I'll be right here.
Initiate drop sequence.
But here's the thing. UFOs and aliens aren't just the stuff of science fiction.
Unidentified aerial phenomena are a potential national security threat, and they need to be treated that way.
Harry Reid's interest in UFOs dates back 30 years, but he kept it quiet until December 2017, when the New York Times reported about ATIP, a secret Pentagon study of UFOs and related phenomena.
Over the past few years, interest in UFOs and aliens has become less fringe. And with it, a new openness to the unknown has taken root.
For too long, the stigma associated with UAPs has gotten in the way of good intelligence analysis.
Congress has been having hearings on the issue.
UAPs are unexplained, it's true, but they are real. They need to be investigated, and many threats they pose need to be mitigated.
The Pentagon has released videos of flying objects we can't explain.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh.
So it's little wonder that today, 51% of Americans believe UFOs are controlled by beings not of this earth. And 1 in 3 believe we're likely to make formal contact with extraterrestrials in the next few decades. But it's not just more people believing in the existence of aliens. From group skywatching sessions in the desert Southwest to backyard meetups in suburbia, many people see aliens as spiritual guides. Through meditation, mantras, and other traditional spiritual practices, they're trying to commune with them, much like people do with their gods. So does that make this UFO movement a religion of sorts? On this episode of How God Works, we'll talk with Diana Walsh Pasulka, religious studies professor and author of the book American Cosmic, about what belief in UFOs might share with other types of religions.
The medieval scholastics talking about these beings and calling them planetary intelligences, these things were real to them in ways that they're becoming real to us today.
And we'll speak with anthropologist Susannah Crockford, host of the new podcast Misinformation, about why from supposed underground bases off the coast of California to aliens living in human form among the red rocks of Sedona, conspiracy theories are giving rise to a new spiritual movement.
The line between what is a religious belief and what is a conspiracy theory is almost entirely subjectively drawn, right? They are both beliefs about things that we have no empirical evidence of.
I'm Dave DeSteno, and this is How God Works. Okay, so just because I love the X-Files doesn't mean I firmly believe aliens are flying in our skies. And Diana Walsh Pasulka was in the same boat. In fact, not too long before she was heading out to the desert blindfolded, she was working on academic papers about purgatory, the place between heaven and hell where Catholics believe souls spend some time, in her work as a professor of religion. But then she encountered something unexpected in her research.
I was doing a lot of work in archives, libraries for really old books and manuscripts for European Catholics, American Catholics, Canadian Catholics. And what I noticed was that in the archives, I kept coming upon what in religious studies are called ascent narratives. People who pass away and people think that their souls then ascend, and sometimes they see their souls ascend. Levitation is a thing in a lot of religions, people levitating up into the sky. But what I found was that some of them were quite different. in that they described things that were seen in the sky, and they would come down and people would engage with them. And sometimes they contained humanoid types of beings that were interpreted either as souls from purgatory or angels or sometimes demons. So I came upon a lot of these ascent narratives, humans going up and beings coming down. And this led a friend of mine, Dr. Jeffrey Kripal, to describe religion, and I paraphrase, as the history of beings from the sky coming down and engaging with beings from the ground, which are us. At no point in that research did I think UFOs.
That is, until a friend of hers said those ascent stories reminded him of a famous Steven Spielberg film about UFOs.
I laughed at him and thought, haha, that's a very good joke.
But she was still curious, and as luck or fate would have it, there was a UFO conference happening in her town.
And I attended it, and I listened to people talk, and their narratives sounded so similar to the ascent narratives from the historical record. So I started to look at those, and I started to look at UFOs as modern ascent narratives.
If you said to me, Dave, do you believe aliens exist in the universe? I would say, yeah, it seems very, very unlikely that in the vast universe, the conditions of life would only form here. And if you say, Dave, do you think they've been here? Well, I'd say, I don't know. I don't see any direct evidence, but sure, they could be. And we might not know about it, or we might have indirect clues like we're seeing now. But that's different than actually some people who are looking to this as a religion or a spiritual experience. So what makes it a religion for some as opposed to just something interesting for people to think about?
Yes, that's such a great question. So we have to really think about what we mean by religion. It's a Western term for basically a set of practices and beliefs associated with something that people consider to be sacred and transforming. So whatever this thing is, this transformative thing, it's going to change your behavior and practices. What's happening now are communities of people are getting together after they've seen unidentified objects, maybe had experiences around that sphere of influence, and they're talking about this online for the most part. And they're forming communities, massive communities, by the way, of people who believe in various ways about what they've experienced. It's a very decentralized, and it's something that is contagious through technology. So it's kind of taking off.
You made a point that we often talk about on the show, which is religion is not just about belief, it's about practices and community. But I'm wondering, in these UFO religions, what are the practices or rituals that they're forming?
So there are sky watches. So people go out and you look up. And a lot of times people feel like the crafts will show up for them. And strangely, things do happen for these people. And this reinforces their belief, obviously. And also they feel like they get what are called downloads.
Downloads are a type of message in modern UFO religio tech speak. But you see something similar in more traditional faiths, too.
Catholics say they get inspiration or signs from the Holy Spirit. It's called signs and wonders. Look for the signs and wonders of God in your life, and you'll see them. This is definitely a thing that the church supports. Well, people believe that they're getting signs and wonders from the UFOs or the UAP that they're in contact with, and then they share these. So, it conforms to the framework of traditional religions.
To me, one of the fascinating things about this is all religions have their origin stories, they have their myths. And if you're a believer, you believe in the myth often as fact, if you're a very devout believer. People outside of the faith would call strange beliefs that can't be proved, and if you're raised Catholic, there's the idea of transubstantiation, that is, the bread and wine that the priest has becomes the body and blood of Jesus. Are you still a practicing Catholic?
I am, actually.
So for someone who is a practicing person of faith, in your case, has your research changed your view of your own religion or spirituality?
It did. Yeah, absolutely. Because what happened was I started to understand the Catholic tradition in a different way.
Like those ascent narratives Diana mentioned earlier. And she came across other strange or miraculous stories in her research into ancient Catholicism, too. Accounts of orbs, discs, and other unidentified things flying around in the sky. What back then they chalked up to souls in limbo, waiting to be prayed back into purgatory.
It actually corresponds more specifically to the narratives that people tell about UFOs. And that was really shocking to me. So the effect that had on my faith was that it, in a sense, strangely reinforced it.
Because instead of UFO narratives being a threat to traditional Catholic teachings and texts, Diana realized it had actually been embraced by religious leaders. The religious leader, in fact.
John Paul II, he's actually written about this. So he's written a treatise, and it was not for the general population. It was actually for his bishops. And he did this in the 1980s, and I reread that. It's called The Treatise on the Angels. And he said, look, there are these beings that we don't generally see, and they exist. And even though we're scientific people today and we don't believe in them, they're still around, and they still intervene in human history. You know, the medieval scholastics talking about these beings and calling them planetary intelligences and associating them with the sky and the planets. And I began to understand that it seemed like the world back then, these things were real to them in ways that they're becoming real to us today. And it kind of woke me up out of, I would call it like almost like a religious stupor, because a lot of people, when they're religious, they go to church or they do the practices, but they don't actually think about any of this stuff.
That's a good point, right? They didn't question that they were real. We questioned because we didn't have scientific proof, but now we're starting to.
Right.
As you look forward with what's happening right now, and people are leaving traditional faiths more and more, it's not that they're becoming completely atheistic. They're often looking for new ways to be spiritual. Do you think that this UFO new religiosity or new religious movement around them is going to be attractive for a lot of people, especially for those who are looking for some basis in science?
Yes, I think that people are going to have different interpretations to inform their spiritual connection with this type of thing. I think the download experience is one of the major practices of this type of new spirituality, new religiosity.
Well, and in some ways, I think that's often what people feel is missing. You know, going to synagogue or going to temple or to church or to mosque can be dry at times, right? And for many people, religion has lost that spiritual part, that experience of awe or transcendence that can be manifest in these download experiences. And I think for the spiritual but not religious, that's what some of them are looking for. One of the big themes that we see right now is this whole idea of reinterpreting ancient religious stories in terms of technology. You can call it the ancient alien theory, right? That is, our ancestors didn't understand technology. They didn't have the language for it. And so when these beings came down, as you said, part of all religion is beings coming down and beings going up. When these beings came down, they were using technology, but of course it was interpreted as magic or some type of divine power.
You have Catholics, you have Muslims, people who are Jewish. They've had experiences of something unknown, and sometimes pretty intense experiences. What they do is they look back to their own tradition and they reinterpret it. And they say, you know, they look at Ezekiel's wheel and they say, okay, this was a UFO event, obviously. And so they then reread their own tradition as giving them information about UFOs. And so that's another huge movement of people that believe in UFOs, but keep their own religion, but they just reinterpret it.
Is that kind of one of the major themes that is going through the UFO community right now?
Okay, this is such a great question. I'm glad you asked it, because a lot of people don't. They just assume that that's the framework, right? That these beings have been here and we've misinterpreted them as gods and goddesses, but it's actually technology. Well, I think we can say now there are unknowns out there. We do have evidence of them, and people do have these experiences, and they have back in the historical record, and they continue to have them. We can say that. We can also say this, and I think this is the best place theoretically to be. We can say, instead of interpreting them as technology, why don't we just say, we don't know what it is. We don't know what they are. We don't know what's going on. And I think we have to start there.
You might remember this article from 2017 that broke the story of the government's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, a $22 million program started 10 years earlier to look into reported UFO sightings. Since then, the Times has reported on military close encounters with UFOs and the government's newly revamped Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force. The stigma around officials acknowledging the existence of UFOs is lifting. But that's different than belief in aliens. Unidentified means, well, we don't know what they are.
So we're talking to people who are scientists at Stanford doing study on this, and they're not saying, oh, this is extraterrestrial. They're saying, what we can say is this is engineered. That's all we can say at this point. We can't make any kind of a conclusion about it. It was engineered by a god. We can't say that. It was engineered by extraterrestrials. We can't say that.
Diana here is referring to the Stanford professor and scientist Gary Nolan, who, among other serious scientists, government officials, and academics that also include Ellen Stofan, former chief scientist at NASA, and former Senator Harry Reid, all publicly legitimize the possibility that some UFOs are the product of alien technology, without making any definitive claims, of course.
Is it possible that there's no one who knows the ultimate answer, what the truth is?
I think now, and the reason I'm so terribly interested in this, is I don't think no one has the answers. And that is too bad, because there are answers out there. But we're not going to get answers just by hoping they come. It can have to take some work.
Whether people are turning to extraterrestrials as a new form of spiritual teacher, or reinterpreting stories from their own faiths to make room for aliens in the narrative, that can seem pretty harmless. But whenever you're talking about secret or sacred knowledge, conspiracy theories often aren't far behind.
The idea of disclosure, have you had conversations with colleagues about the wisdom of letting all this loose? Is the public ready for it? Depends on what it is, I guess.
When we come back, we'll take a look at exactly why that is, and what role it's playing in emerging UFO religions. According to anthropologist Susannah Crockford, the idea of aliens has shifted quite a bit in recent years. Where we used to think of them as a potential invading force threatening our world, with the likes of Stephen Hawking saying that sending signals to deep space is like saying, hey, we're here, come conquer us. Today, most people think of aliens as friendly allies, worthy of looking up to, even worshiping. Aliens aren't the problem. They're the solution. It's we humans, our systems and institutions, that are messing things up and need some guidance.
I think that it goes along with shifts in how people here on Earth are perceived. There's more of a sense of decline, and this can be seen in both right and left-wing narratives, that America is in some form of decline, and that there's this generally negative view of the way government works, of the way various social institutions work, especially things like the media is seen very negatively. And in that context, there's kind of a need to see as something coming to save us or to change us, or that maybe we're part of that change already ourselves, working to kind of save humanity from this parlous state that we find ourselves in. And I think that a lot of the current alien narratives really play into that sense of, you could call it millenarianism, this idea that we're in the end times and that a savior is coming, the revelation of the truth that is going to change everything and create a whole new social order to make everything better and different.
This is a familiar narrative in lots of religious traditions, kind of like the Hindu idea of avatars, which are gods who come down to earth in bodily form, or the idea of the Messiah or Savior present in all the Abrahamic faiths.
And for some people, that savior is extraterrestrial. They just kind of slot aliens in there instead of a Messiah who's a person.
Or They take it one step further. They themselves are the aliens, often here to improve the situation of Earth. This is a group of people that Susannah encountered while researching her book Ripples of the Universe. They call themselves starseeds.
They are alien consciousnesses in a human body. And sometimes they have experienced, it's called being a walk-in. At a certain point in their life, the alien consciousness walked into their human body and they became aware of that. And it's become very, very popular.
Starseed affirmations to activate and awaken your galactic DNA.
I'm Natalie, and I am a starseed. I am a higher conscious being.
It really exploded in the last few years on TikTok in particular.
How do you know a starseed?
Number one is a strong sense of being different or not belonging on Earth. Reptilian starseeds have very strong souls, and they can pretty much endure anything.
Alien stuff. And like my alien stuff and my starseed stuff.
And that means it's reaching a whole younger demographic, which had been previously mostly unaware of these sorts of ideas. And there are quite a few kind of large accounts across social media that have become very popular.
My name is Elizabeth April. I actually think that I'm an alien in a human body here on planet Earth with a message, with a mission to help you remember who you are.
And she is a starseed. She gives starseed kind of advice how to tell your starseed.
I have a starseed quiz for all of you. So if you don't really know if you're a starseed, and you don't really know why you're feeling all of these things, then stay tuned because I will.
Before it was called starseeds, is it just kind of the next generation of something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this idea that you can kind of embody some sort of non-human force or entity or identity is quite an old one. So it's not so different from other forms of religious practice that do exist. You can see it in the Theosophical Society with these idea of ascended masters. You can see it in things like spirit possession, this idea that various gods can be inhabited through ritualistic dances. And I think that starseeds is the latest iteration of that. So the people that I spoke to, it was mostly that they had this sense of, you can call it a crisis, they called it the awakening experience, and they didn't have words for it. And then usually it was through their online circles that other people would tell them, well, that sounds like you're a starseed.
It's true that this idea of an awakening pops up in religious narratives of many faiths. But you can also find it in some other places, too.
This idea of awakening is also the metaphor used for when you realize the truth that you're being lied to, that in fact the deep state controls everything. And that's also called an awakening. It's very strong in QAnon circles as well. So these motifs are shared between these different groups. Conspiracy theories are really part and parcel of beliefs about aliens, because if you think that aliens exist, then at the same time, you also think that the US government, with its very well-funded Air Force, must know about them. They must. A lot of the early stories were from pilots or crash sites, like Roswell is a crash site, that were in areas where there was a lot of US military bases. So I think you have to see alien beliefs as part of a way of working out America's slightly tortured relationship with its own military and its own military capabilities.
The line between the mysteries of a religion and those of a conspiracy theory can be blurry. If you're not Christian, you could view the whole idea of Jesus' resurrection as a kind of conspiracy theory. He was put to death, but certain people saw that he came back to life. Then his small group of followers try to propagate the story in the face of societal disbelief. It's the same with many religions. There's some unverifiable stories about miraculous events or beings. Stories that people want to believe. So when it comes to this new movement around UFOs, might conspiracy theories be playing a similar role?
One thing that's really interesting about spirituality is that conspiracy theories actually have a really long history amongst this particular group. And it's really shows the blurring of that boundary between what is religion and what is a conspiracy theory. Because you're right, like the line between what is a religious belief and what is a conspiracy theory is almost entirely subjectively drawn, right? They are both non-empirical beliefs, i.e. beliefs about things that we have no empirical evidence of. Now, of course, there are lots of things that are countenanced by people who are quite reasonable that don't fit into official accounts. And this is where it really links into what you said about when you get these little bits, these little nuggets where it seems like, oh, maybe that's true. It absolutely fuels the idea that there's a wider truth out there, right? Like the X-Files slogan. The truth is out there, but they're hiding it from you. And this idea that perhaps the US military is hiding things from the rest of the populace, well, that's actually not an irrational statement, is it? And the things that are true in terms of conspiracies fuel the things, all of the ideas that have no evidence. And it's the same with aliens, right? There's this kind of assumption that, well, we've got enough to go on. We've got enough lights in the sky and strangely shaped objects and all of those pilots who said that they could see things. Well, they can't all be wrong, can they? And that's the sort of suppositional thinking that goes behind aliens.
But also behind other forms of what can be broadly called stigmatized knowledge. Things like astrology, channeling, even alternative medicine.
And by stigmatized knowledge, what we mean is like forms of knowledge, ideas that are not well regarded, let's put it that way, in the mainstream. So it's sort of pushed aside, it's not given any credence. And if you start to get interested in spirituality, you start to encounter a lot of ideas which have been rejected, for better or worse, by the mainstream. One of the most common routes in is alternative medicine, right? A lot of people suffer from illnesses that are not well treated by mainstream medicine, especially chronic pain, any kind of chronic or autoimmune disorder, sometimes terminal illnesses like cancer. And when you're in that state where you just want to find some relief, if you find something that gives you that relief, you're going to do it, whether there is a biochemical or biophysical explanation for what's happening. You just know you feel better. So then you might start to question things where you're like, well, the doctors didn't help me with this terrible condition that's ruining my life. What else out there might be different than what I previously assumed? And then that leads to these questioning. And then you start to entertain these ideas. Well, maybe all these other things that everyone is saying is wrong and stupid and false. There's something really interesting about the fact that these sorts of ideas, when they're spread amongst people who are involved in spirituality, they get labeled conspiracy theories. But ideas which are similar but spread amongst people in much more what you might think of as traditional organized religions are not called conspiracy theories. And why not?
I have to admit it. This is a good point. I'm not here to cast doubt on anyone's religion or spiritual beliefs, and I'm the first to say that I don't know what's out there. But what makes UFO spirituality really fit this role is the kind of anti-establishment thinking that goes along with it. There's no Pope or Archbishop of Canterbury laying things out. And that leaves lots of room for differing ideas and competing claims. This was something Susannah encountered in her fieldwork in Sedona.
This is one of the main defining characteristics that scholars write about New Age spirituality a lot, that it has no authorizing structures. It has no hierarchy. There are no scriptures. It doesn't have any form of dogma. But the fact that it doesn't have all of those things is a real draw to the people who get involved in it. A lot of the people, especially that I got to know in Sedona, had previously been evangelical Christians, Catholics, and they didn't like those things about organized religion. They didn't like being told what to do. They didn't like having to do this thing just because everyone else had done it for generations upon generations. They wanted to do their own thing. And it's this individualism, which I think also steers them politically towards libertarianism, this sort of, we're going to just do what we think. And they even take it sometimes so far as everyone has their own truth, right? You have your truth, I have my truth, and I'm going to use my discernment to decide whether I'm going to agree with you or not. And this means that you can have people within the same kind of broad label, if you want to call it that, of New Age spirituality, who have very different ways of engaging with it. So someone might talk about aliens and the next person might do none of that. They don't believe in aliens. They're more into yoga, but they will accept each other on some level because they were like, well, that's your truth. Your truth is aliens. That's not my truth. But this form of relativism can lead them into sort of ethically slippery positions, I think, sometimes. And this is, again, where the conspiracy theories come back. Because instead of having a community to sort of police these fairly divergent viewpoints, they say, no, everyone's got their own truth. If that person believes that the deep state exists and is trafficking children, then that's their truth and they're going to believe that. And so then these beliefs become more and more common and prevalent because there is some level of social acceptance for them.
In general, pluralism is a positive thing, especially when it comes to religion. In the U.S., there are many faiths that offer different perspectives and different ideas. But when pluralism goes infinite, when each person can have their own truth about reality, problems can start to creep in. Alternative facts spring up, and with them, conspiracy theories that become difficult to eradicate. And there's a cost to that. Without a set of values or beliefs to bind people, a sense of community can be hard to come by. It's true that there are certainly online communities in the UFO movement, but many are built around conspiracy. And when a community is bonded by a sense of distrust, that's when things can become dicey. It's when the power of religion to move hearts and minds can start following ever darker rabbit trails. That said, the basic belief in aliens isn't inherently dangerous, or even all that outlandish. Feeling you've made contact with a higher entity, awakening to a once hidden truth, looking up to the sky, trying to commune with great beings whose power you don't truly understand. It might seem strange, but it is the story of religion. Maybe alien religions are just the latest iteration of these old stories, an outgrowth of an increasingly spiritual but not religious society seeking answers and comfort. Whether it'll lead to a new theology or even a centralized leader, as is the case with more traditional faiths, who knows? But at the moment, it's filling people with feelings of awe and wonder, communion and purpose, the kind of generative unknowing that leads us to look forever inward or upward for some kind of enlightenment.
I love the look on people's faces when I tell them that I'm Zoroastrian, because they have no idea what that is.
Next time on How God Works, in a world dominated by Big God, what's it like to be a member of a tiny religion? Whether it's an ancient tradition at risk of dying out,
we asked them, what is the greatest threat to the community? And the vast majority of people said that it was a small and aging population.
Or a brand new religion that hasn't had a chance to grow yet.
New religions are very natural. I think of them as baby religions. They're kind of like weeds in the garden. They're plants that we're not used to.
Join us next time as we explore the benefits and challenges of being one of the few rather than one of the many. How God Works is hosted and written by me, Dave DeSteno. Our senior producer is Josie Holtzman. Our producer is Sophie Eisenberg. Our intern is Annika de Vries. Executive producer is Genevieve Sponsler. Merritt Jacob is our mix engineer and composed our theme, which was arranged by Chloe DeSteno. The executive producer of PRX Productions is Jocelyn Gonzalez. This podcast was also made possible with support from the John Templeton Foundation. If you want to learn more, you can find our website at howgodworks, all one word, .org, or follow me on X or Blue Sky at David DeSteno.